Thank you, Donnie. Hey, it's good to have somebody of Donnie's size as a youth pastor, right? Come on, man. I told him I don't want to go to the gym with you, bro. I said, you got too much juice. I'll take you and my son can go smash it. I'll just take pictures of you guys. Hey, it's good to be with you. My name's Chad, and this is Paul Black. Thanks, Paul. Pay no attention to the man with the camera and the black jacket. Hey, it's good to be with you. I want to say a big thank you to Pastor Dan and Jessica, Jim and Debbie, and Dan and Nicole, Donnie and Nicole for having me. I haven't been back in a little while, but has anybody ever heard me speak before? Anybody? You? Sheepishly, you're that guy. I am that guy. Anybody else? Have you ever heard me talk about suicide before? Wow, this is going to be good. This is a whole new crowd. This is a difficult topic to talk about, but I want you just to be patient with me. I'm glad you're here tonight. You know, I don't have a lot of product. It's not like I'm a guy who gets up here and sells T-shirts or frogs or rubber snakes or whatever, although I have done that before. But I did write a book, and it's a graphic novel, not in the sense of like a cartoon book, but it's called The Curse of the Father, and it's my personal testimony of walking through suicide and what that meant to me and how I overcame that. It takes place in the Sea of Trees in Japan, which you will hear more about in a minute. But I have a little trailer I'd like to show you about the book if you have any questions about what's in it. I think the trailer will tell you everything. It's a 1-minute trailer. We got that? Can we play it? The Curse of the Father.
That leads to demise. 2 books await, one of life, one of lies. You must uncover what was left behind and face the shadows in your mind. Alive will become the thoughts you hold and turn your soul dark with cold. In the forest, how long you will toil, confined by my prison of roots and soil. What lies in wait, it shall be birthed. Yet from the darkness, you may find your worth. Your burdens so light, should they be shared. So come with your friends, if you so dare. Rest in my kingdom, you won't be a bother. But here you must face the curse of the Father.
There you go. It's a good book. In fact, I gave it to a friend of mine, and I said, what do you think? He goes, dude, I can't read that book at night. I said, why? He goes, bro, that thing got a hold of me. But it's if you want to take a deeper journey into what I dealt with and what I overcame, this book will definitely set you on the right path. Yep. Well, hey, are you ready to talk about some unusual, difficult topics? Can we do that? You know, one thing that's been very difficult for me, and I think for all of us, is that during 2020, we saw our worlds unravel, didn't we? We saw lockdowns, we saw death, we saw friends and family members suffer. Schools were shut down, churches shut down. For some of you, addictions just rose in your heart. Some of you became addicted to things you thought you'd never get addicted to. Some of you are dealing with emotions and dealing with spirits and dealing with attitudes you thought you would never have to deal with. But once all of this began to happen, we began to see things in our lives begin to bubble up to the top. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody relate? Come on, only a few of you? Well, I'll keep talking. We'll see if we can get some more of this to relate to you. And I want to talk to you about suicide. It's a difficult topic to talk about. A lot of people don't want to talk about it, especially in church. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of embarrassment. There's a lot of insecurity that goes along with it. In fact, what's interesting is that this topic was thrust on me many years ago, but it became something I needed to deal with when somebody who went to the rock took their life. This was a young person. This was many years ago. And I remember that Dr. Barron and myself and the team, we said we need to do something to discuss and talk about mental health and talk about suicide for young people. And I'm going to show you a portion of what we had created tonight, but just know that this is a personal topic for me and for San Bernardino. If you know anything in the past 6 or 7 years, there's been a number of suicides. Friends of mine, friends of my children at different schools around the community. And so this is a fresh thing we're talking about. So I'm just asking that you would keep your mind and keep your heart open with me tonight as we talk about this. And please understand, if you feel a little bit uncomfortable, I understand. I do. This is always an uncomfortable topic to talk about. But let's look at what Jesus said in John 10:10. Understand that I am not a medical doctor. You with me? I have no degree behind my name. I don't. I have some degree work in psychology, but I'm not a licensed psychologist. And I'm not talking to you from a medical perspective tonight. I am an expert in one thing when it comes to the heart of a person, and that's their soul, that's their mind, that's their emotions. That's what I've done for 30 years, and I've only done it with young people and teenagers. So you get the benefit of that tonight. I am not going to tell you don't talk to your doctor. I'm not going to tell you don't take medication. I'm not going to tell you don't go to your therapist. I am speaking to you in the spiritual side of who you are. That you would understand that the battle that you're facing right now, or you may be struggling with, or a friend and family member is struggling with, has its origination in a spiritual realm. What did Jesus say in John 10:10? The thief has come to steal, kill, and destroy. Understand, there is an enemy at play in your life. And it hates everything about you, and it wants to destroy not just you, but it's really after the call that God has placed on each of your lives. Jesus said, the thief has come to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come to give you life and that you may have it more abundantly. Are you ready for some abundant life? You know, if you came tonight expecting for a change, I believe you can get it tonight. If you came saying, I need some relief and freedom, I love that song they were singing. I don't know if you sang that for me, Donnie, but I was weeping in the back listening to that song. I was like, this is a ridiculous song, bro. Well, that was a good one. We need to play that at the end, man, because I know he can do it. Sorry, I'm doing this because I need to see Donnie. If I couldn't see that giant shadow in the back, there he is. Look at those guns, dude. What the heck, man? I got to give him some props. I'm glad you're back, Donnie. I met Donnie years ago when he was here, and then he was at Pastor Tom. But when I heard you were back, I was like, oh. No, I'm serious. You know, when you get my age, you got to have friends, and it's good to have friends with you. It's good to see John, Jill, Paul's here. Anyway, it's good to be back with you guys. All right, let's talk about the battle for your soul. Understand that's exactly what it is. This is not something that I take lightly, or when people talk to me about suicide. Whenever somebody says something like that, I take it incredibly seriously. Now, you can say, well, they're just talking, they want attention. No, I don't always believe that, because sometimes people are sending out warning signs, talking to you, saying certain things that get you to maybe pay attention to them or help, and it's important that we cue in on those. And I wrote this down, and there's two types of people sitting here, and I just want to read this to you and see if you fall into this category. Number one, those who know someone has dealt with this issue or has dealt with these issues in the past. Maybe you are struggling with thoughts of suicide, self-harm. Maybe you're dealing with a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. Maybe that's part of who you are. Or maybe you have a friend or a family member who is struggling with this. I guess if I were to ask by a show of hands, and I won't, how many of you know somebody, either you go to school with, a friend or family member, who is talking about suicide, who is depressed, who you're concerned about? Most of you would probably say, well, I know firsthand or secondhand or thirdhand. It's a common problem, and people don't want to talk about it because you feel unqualified to answer the questions. This is why people won't talk about it. Well, so-and-so says they want to kill themselves. What do I say? Listen. Just listen. Be there for them. Spend time with them. Hear what they have to say. That's the most important thing. Nobody's asking you to be a psychologist, but they are asking you to love and to be a friend. And they're reaching out to you because they feel like they can trust you. Statistics show that every person sitting in this room knows someone, friend, family, sibling, who is going through some of this. And my greatest desire, and I like Pastor Donnie's willingness, because we scheduled doing this months ago, and I said, I even changed the dates once or twice because I was in Brazil and then Africa. But, you know, Donnie's always been a real advocate of really promoting mental health. Donnie, everything that you did with City seeing young people set free and breaking chains, oh, bro, it's just unbelievable. You're the ones who are going to have to go back to school tomorrow. You're the ones who are going to have to go back home. And so any information that I can give you or any kind of insight that you can get that's going to help you see your world a little bit clearer tonight is exactly what I'm looking for. And I think there's some of you in here that we're going to pray for you. Understand, this is church. You with me? I am not ashamed to say the name of Jesus. There's sometimes I get in school scenarios and I cannot say the name of Jesus. Do you know how frustrating that is to me? Because it just kind of comes out of me, especially in situations like this. So I want you to do this. I want you to take your right hand, put it on your heart. Come on, little active interaction here. Say this. Say, God, in the name of Jesus, you have the key. Open my heart. Open my eyes. Open my ears. Let me see Jesus. Amen. There you go. Sometimes you just got to expect and confess what you're believing God's going to do. Now, there are people here that also have issues that you're dealing with. If you're struggling with depression and you're under the care of a doctor, continue to see your doctor. If you're on medication for that, please do not stop taking your medication. Are you with me? If you are in counseling, please continue to go to counseling. And if you are dealing with thoughts or ideas or whispers or certain things that are messing with you, I want you to listen closely to me because that stuff can be shut down tonight. Yeah? Come on. I mean, listen, yeah, it can be. I have done meetings like this, gosh, for the past 10 plus years. And I've done them all over the world. And it's amazing what God is willing to do to those who are willing just to admit that they have a great need and there's only one person who can do something for them. Yeah? So I'm saying all that to prep you to just get your heart ready. Suicide has become a final solution for a lot of people. In fact, during 2020, suicides have gone up. I remember when COVID first hit, and there was a big thing that came out in the media, and there were 600 doctors in California who came together as a small coalition to send a letter to the government and to the powers that be saying, this lockdown stuff is killing a generation. Suicides are up 1,000% on the suicide hotline. I mean, these doctors were pleading to get the information out there, to make them aware that the decisions that we're doing for a generation is not going to help, it's actually harming. And it was funny because I say funny, it was tongue-in-cheek funny, is that you never heard anything else about it. As soon as they started censoring the news, as soon as they started clamping down on social media things, you never heard anything about it. In fact, I had Instagram and Facebook start blocking me and shutting me down because I was posting anti-suicide information on my account. I actually had to write them, I had to protest, I had to file an appeal, and I said, why would you shut me down? This is anti-suicide. Come on, AI, robots, whatever idiots in there trying to look for something. Do you understand anti means not? They're like, oh, well, we're just concerned. And I said, y'all should be concerned about the other stuff, not this. I'm promoting life. And so there's a very constructed, orchestrated plan to keep the truth from you, especially as it concerns mental health and thoughts of suicide and some of the other weird things we see going on. People are scared to talk about it. You know why? Because they feel like they're not qualified to talk about it. Churches won't talk about it because once a pastor gets in the pulpit and starts to talk about suicide, they realize it could open up a can of worms that could never, ever be put on a hook and actually fished with. See, this is why I'm a big advocate of having people in the church, not just pastors, but clinical professionals who can talk to people, who can talk to young people. Listen, I am not anti-therapy or anti-psychology. I am pro all of that. But tonight I want to talk to you about the spiritual side of it. And I'm so glad that you're here at The Rock because I can tell you what, if you're here, there's people here who want to love you and talk to you and will pray with you. You are not alone. Can I tell you? Listen to me. You're not alone in this church. I know you're not. I mean, Donnie and I have talked about this. I know Pastor Dan and Jessica are very passionate about this. In fact, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we did an event similar to this in the big church. My God, the church was packed. We had 3,000 plus people in there. It was incredible. And it just showed me that the need for people to come together in this type of community to know that you have support, you have people who will help you, who will love you, who will stick by you, because you're not going to do this by yourself. Your life was never meant to be lived alone, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but you're not supposed to do life alone. This is why Jesus sent the disciples out 2 by 2. Why? Because if one falls down, he picks the other one up. You're never going to have a life of real fulfillment in mental health, spiritual, emotional, anything if you're trying to do this by yourself, yeah? Come on, we're trying to build community. That's all we're about. Rock, we're about community. We have to talk about it. That's the biggest issue I find. There's so little communication about this, especially in the spiritual arena, because people are afraid to talk about it. Well, what happens if I talk about this? Well, what if this person? What if this person? What if this person? Everything starts off small. Sometimes you just have to begin a conversation and see where it goes. And that's exactly what I'm hoping will begin tonight, is there'll be a conversation that you begin to have with God, that you begin to have with your friends, maybe with your family, maybe with some relatives. Because as long as this conversation stays hidden, nobody can ever see really what's going on. It's kind of like deception. It's kind of camouflage-ish, and that's not what we're into. A couple statistics before I get going. 1 in 5 teenagers have attempted suicide. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know you didn't. In fact, nobody here did. Attempted is what I really meant to say. So you can do the math and say, well, Chad, that's not always the case. In the bigger picture, it is the case. In fact, in Africa, the numbers have increased, in South Africa, especially in the past year, where some of the teachers and some of the government officials are scratching their head going, what's going on? And I'll talk about that later. Suicide is the first leading cause of death for young people 15 to 24 years of age. Did you know that the homosexual transgender community is 3 times more likely to commit suicide than standard sexual normal people? You don't hear about that, do you? It's a mess. Look it up. You can see. You know, veterans from foreign wars, our veterans in this country, 22 a day kill themselves. You don't hear that information either, do you? There's a couple of organizations that I support and stay in touch with and have for many years who work with veterans and who work with ex-military. And it's just unbelievable what happens in the mind of these men when they come back. And I'm thankful for people who are willing to talk about that. First responders, suicide rates are big. In fire departments, police. Once again, this is stuff you never, ever hear about. In fact, I was talking to someone the other day who's a first responder, and they said, you know, here in San Bernardino, from like December 31st to January 5th, the suicides just spike. I thought that sounds about right. People get depressed. It's Christmas. People get lonely. You combine that with addictions, alcohol, drug abuse. It becomes a real toxic mess. And so it's important that you understand that there's things going on around you that unless you're really thinking about, praying about, or asking questions or talking about it, not in a weird way, but you'll never know what's going on. And I always say this, there are people that you know, probably you go to school with, who you may not know exactly what's going on in their mind, but don't always let a smile push you away or keep you from asking questions and probing and seeing how people are really doing, especially nowadays. I'm so thankful things have begun to open up again. We've seen a lot of changes around the country as far as masks and lockdowns and some of this, and I'm really believing that the damage that was done, that Jesus can wipe that out. You with me? That there can really be a miracle, and some of the things that have tried to encumber young people are going to just be pushed away because of the faith they have. Just like that song said, I believe God can do it. I do. I have seen mental health restored. I've seen broken lives restored. Suicide is the fourth leading cause of death for adults ages 18 to 65. I always say this, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Did you hear what I said? It's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. You can't just alt control delete and restart or reboot the whole system. It should not be an option. It shouldn't be an option on the table. Let me say this and then I'm going to begin. He said, let our emotions and our feelings and what's been going on in the past year and a half, 18 months, have overwhelmed us. We're desperate to escape, but a lot of the times the escape that people are looking for is in addictions, self-harm, suicide ideation, depression, isolation, and I want to address all of those tonight in some of the ways that I like to do it. The past 2 years have been incredible. I did a lot of study and looking at some of the things that were going on in Brazil and in South Africa especially. And it's interesting that the numbers that you see, in my opinion, are not accurately reported because there is so much shame involved with it. If somebody's child kills himself, it isn't reported as a suicide because there's a lot of shame involved in that. You with me? There's a lot of other complications that go along with that. But talking to pastors and talking to principals in schools, in all of these places, they say it is incredible what's happening and the media will never pick it up. You would have to be involved in the school or know the friends and the family about some of the things that's really going on. And it has provoked me to be incredibly aggressive and incredibly outspoken, especially when it comes to your age group. I've been doing this for 30 years and I don't really want to work with adults. Adults are too dumb. They're too set in their ways. They don't listen to you. They think they know everything. I know that because I'm 56 years old. I know how I am. But talking to you, thankfully, you haven't been completely hardened and jaded. And so it's a place right now where you can really receive some of what I'm telling you. As we look at suicide, and as me and the number of people, even with Dr. Barron over the years that we've looked at this, I've identified what I consider to be 4 dominoes in this suicide game, and I don't say it like that. It's just there are 4 pillars that we've identified that if one of these pillars begin to fall, they all fall in line. And once you begin to see these pillars in your life and then they begin to tip, that's when you really need to pay attention. You need to look for them in your life, in your thoughts, your emotions. You need to look for them in the lives of your friends and family. But I want you to remember these 4, and I'm going to explain them each to you. I've noticed this in every culture that I've gone to, and it's been consistent every time. The top 4 contributing factors to be true in every culture is, number 1, lack of self-worth. We have a generation that has everything to live with, but nothing to live for. If I ask you what your name is, you can tell me what your name is. You know your name, but you don't know your purpose. Any of you tell me your name, you tell me your last name, your middle name. I mean, we've got Latinas in here with 6 or 7 names. You tell me all of them. But if I ask you, what were you designed and created to do? What is your purpose? You're like, I'm in school. You see, if you don't know your purpose, how can you step into your destiny? If you don't know who you are, if you don't know who God created you to be, if you don't know what God's word says about you, how can you ever step out of that sludge pit of evolutionary nonsense and say, man, God called me. I'm special. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. God knows the number of hairs on my head. God called me before I was in my mother's womb. If you don't know what God says about you, how can you ever fight the lies that are coming against you? God says, I know the plans I have for you, plans to do good to you, to prosper you, to give you a future, to set your feet in a high place, to be the glory of me to other people. But if you don't know that, you see, Jesus said you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. If you don't know the truth, how can you be free? I say, that's just not what I believe. Great. It's not really always about what you believe, it's what's true. A lot of people believe crazy things. I like what James said. He goes, you believe there's one God? Good. The demons believe and tremble. Well, that's just not what I believe. Hey, knock yourself out, man. Lack of self-worth. That's the first domino. Some of you are dealing with that tonight. What about some of the things you've heard at home? What about the words you've heard from friends and family? Some of you may be in households right now that are an absolute nightmare for you, but that's where you are. I don't know what's going on as far as what the words are being said to you. Let me give you an example of words for a minute. To this side of the room, I'm not looking at you, I'm going to speak in space. Listen to these words. I love you. You're beautiful. You're a success. You can have a great future. Wouldn't you like to hear that every day from somebody that you respect? See, those words have life. You can feel there's something about those words. Now, what if I go to, this is not you, I'm going to talk to this wall. You're ugly, you're stupid, you're a mistake, I hate you. Do you feel the difference in those words? Words have power. Words are containers for power. And maybe there's words in your life that have been thrown at you by friends, by family. I don't know what it is, but it's affecting your self-worth. You're like, well, my parents don't even like me, so why would anybody else like me? And if my parents don't like me, they're the only example I have of a God who's supposed to love me. Why would God love me if I'm hated by people who say they love me? You see how it just goes in this twisted circular mess? Number one, lack of self-worth. If you don't know who you are and who you were called and created to be, that's a problem. A lot of that's happened during the lockdown, hadn't it? We've lost our purpose. What am I supposed to do? I was going to school. I can't go to school. I was seeing my friends. I can't see my friends. I was on this path. I was doing this. College shut down. I had to move back home. That can be a problem, and it's a stressor. Lack of self-worth. You know your name, but you don't know your purpose. Speaking of that, some of you get your purpose from this. You always like the example, Adam and Eve were in the garden. The snake tempted them. Come on, eat the fruit, eat the fruit, eat the fruit. I think it's the same thing going on in today's world. It's like a vicious cycle, a 1,000-year cycle that never changes. You're still being tempted to eat fruit every day. I believe the fruit in the garden was an apple. I believe the fruit today is an apple. Some of you, a 10-second delay, that's good. You'll never forget it, though. You see, this is plastic, this is glass, this does nothing. It has no power over me. But the technology in this has opened your eyes to see things you should have never seen, to hear things you should never hear. Come on, it'll make you smart. What did the snake tell the woman? It's good for food. Come on, you have this, you'll be popular. Everybody wants an iPhone 13, 14, 17, you name it. Who cares what it is? It'll make you smart, but you can study on it. Yeah. Make you popular. Yeah. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. You hear what I'm saying. You know this apple is still speaking, even as it did 6,000 years ago. Lack of self-worth, it shouldn't be based on your Instagram followers. It shouldn't be based on your likes. It just shouldn't. Because your whole day can rise and fall on one comment on social media. You can get up feeling like $1 million, looking good. Ladies, you're ready to go to school. You're the biggest, the baddest. Guys, same with you. And somebody can say one thing to you. Oh, your whole day is destroyed. Your emotional tissue paper, it just gets destroyed by a single word. If it gets destroyed by what comes through here, what about what people say to you? What about your parents say to you? What do your parents say to you every day when you go home? Do you hear words of life from your parents? Ladies, what about the boys you're dating? What are they saying to you? How does that affect your self-worth? And what about some of the things they may be asking you to do or forcing themselves on you? How does that affect your self-worth? Ooh, yeah, Yeah, he's talking about that. You darn right I am. Lack of self-worth. Satan goes after that because if you don't know who you are, you don't know who God created you to be, and you don't know what he said about you, you're trapped. Number 2, this has been a big one that I've seen. It's the second domino, breakdown of family. We've seen a lot of breakdowns of families, especially in South Africa. With the lockdown, you have families that have been completely locked down. South Africa has one of the largest populations of single-family households. That's mothers and grandmothers raising these families because the men have left. We don't see that in San Bernardino, do we? We don't see that in America, do we? That's a third world problem. No, it's a first world problem. You have a breakdown of family. So you have the lockdowns, and you have families who are now trapped together in this home. One of the kids told me in South Africa, she said, yeah, when the lockdown happened, my dad came back. He said, we're all locked down in the house together. The family was a problem the whole time anyway. My dad's an alcoholic, and he used to beat my mom. And then when he was locked in the house, he was abusing me. Breakdown of family. Divorce rates have escalated. You know, divorce rates in the church have just shot up through the ceiling. You know, the word covenant doesn't mean anything to people anymore. It just doesn't. And I think the biggest danger is, yes, the parents have a problem and they don't want to see each other, whatever, they divorce. Okay, but what about us? What about the kids in the home? What about you who have to walk through that? That's where the rejection resides. That's where the real attack comes. It's coming after you. And so how many young people have I talked to personally in Brazil? Let me give you an example. We're in a little city called Itabaraba. It's in the state of Bahia, and we did events like this for schools for a couple of weeks. And in one of the events, a girl walked up to me. She was weeping afterwards, and she came up to me. She just wept. She says, I want to die. She's beautiful, 18 years old. I said, whoa, 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 whoa. I had a translator. I don't speak Portuguese. I was just talking to her. And she said, you don't understand how bad my family life is. She said, my dad left. He's a drug addict. My mom's an alcoholic and a drug addict. Said, I live with my grandmother, and she's dying of cancer. I said, what am I going to do? I thought, this is a problem. You see, when the family unit begins to break down, it affects who you are, especially in Latina culture. In Brazil and the other place I go to, family's a big deal. When you lose family, man, you lost everything. Can I get an amen? Come on, family defines who we are. Family strengthens us. Family supports us. I have my secretary right now in Brazil. She still lives with her parents. She's 30 years old, and she's a lawyer. You see, in that culture, you stay together until you find a husband because it's just a lot cheaper. There's a lot more security. And so when family breaks down, where are you going to go? What's this girl going to do? Man, I was scrambling to get the principal saying, can we help this girl? And they did. They were able to rally around her and give her some support. So lack of self-worth is one of those dominoes. As it tips, it falls into breakdown of family. Do you realize that this is not family? Can I get a bigger yes? This is not family. This is not, I feel like I'm talking to a caveman. This is not friend. This, no friend. Those people are not your friends. If you want a friend, you need to be able to know what their breath smells like. You want to know if they got an ingrown hair in their nose. You want to know if they need to wipe the boogers out their eyes. You want somebody to get close to who knows you. I'm sorry, don't be afraid. I'll step back. I want to be your friend, but I'm not going to get that close. Intimacy is friendship. When family breaks down, there's a loss of intimacy, and we can't live without intimacy. We were designed to be touched. We were designed to have relationship. We were designed to have a family. And some of that, for some of you, maybe that's broken down. And let me tell you what, do you realize if it's broken down, it's not your fault? Do you hear what I said? If your family is in the process of, if it's already broken or in breaking, do you realize it's not your fault? How many 12, 14, 16-year-old girls and guys I've talked to around the world who've come to me and said, Chad, my family's falling apart. My parents don't like each other. And I just told them, look at me. Do you realize that's not your fault? They just started weeping. They said, it isn't? I said, no, baby, it isn't your fault. But see, that kind of stuff just gets in your head. And Satan, that devil, he uses that to lie to you and attack your self-worth and to show you and to tell you crazy stuff. And then he'll combine that with all of your loser friends that you have who really aren't your friends. And it just becomes a tempest in your mind. Lack of self-worth, breakdown of family. Number 3, breakdown of community. One thing that I noticed in Brazil and South Africa, and I do most of my work there, but I know here that it is the same. Community is important, especially when you're in school and you're growing up. With the lockdowns, we had no school, we had no soccer, we had no taekwondo. You couldn't do anything. You know, the only activity you did was right here. Boom, 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 Xbox, whatever the games you play now. I mean, that's what y'all were doing. That was the only activity you had. But you realize that's not real community. And I spent so much time talking to my friends on that. That's not community either. Do you realize this is not community? Well, I have a couple of Facebook groups and stuff I'm doing stuff with. Listen, what did I just go back to and say about friends? Friends are here. Friends are like this. Friends are not in your peripheral. Friends are in your frontal vision. Those are the people who love you and involved with you. But when a breakdown of community happens and you can't go to church, that was tough in this community, Donnie. Watching churches close down, watching young people really desperately want to come together, trying to do some stuff online. And can somebody agree with me that Zoom church is not the same as this? Oh my God. I know that's the best we could do. I realize that. And listen to me, God used it. But I can tell you what, there ain't no virus in hell is going to stop me from getting face to face with a bunch of kids. I don't care what you throw at me. What you going to do, arrest me? Okay. What you gonna do, put a mask on me? Come do it. Go put it on Donnie. I dare anybody to go try to put a mask on Donnie. Good luck. Breakdown of community. So lack of self-worth, breakdown of family, lack of community. See, some of you've lost that security, that mental health security that comes from community, being involved with a group of people, whether it be church, whether it be school, whether it be football, soccer, basketball, you name it, and that weighs on you. Number 3. Number 4, and this is the most dangerous one, and this is what I want you to consider. Number 4, isolation and loneliness. The nonsense that has happened has just amplified all 4 of these, but like nothing else, isolation and loneliness got a shot of steroids from the lockdown and from the COVID nonsense. Because once you find yourself all alone, that's when you're at your most dangerous place. You see, being alone can be good. I mean, I'm an extrovert, but I need my alone time. My wife is a complete introvert, which is a good mix. Do not get me wrong. And I'm like, you want to go do something? Nope, want to read a book. I'm like, all right, let's do it. Hey, man, opposites work. Can I tell you? Opposites work. But it's not always good to be isolated and to feel like there's nobody around you. And one thing that I've seen, especially in Africa, especially in the girls, so many of these young women found themselves pulling into this little bitty, weird type of fantasy, weird world on the phone where they just disappeared. And they said, Chad, that was the most, I asked them all these questions, and they said, Chad, that was the most dangerous place I could be, because when I was alone, by myself, with my thoughts, listening to all of my self-talk, she goes, I began to hear another voice in there. It sounded like my voice, but I knew it wasn't. I thought, aha, here we go. Exposure, this is what's going on. What did Jesus say about the good shepherd in the book of John? He said if a shepherd has 100 sheep and he loses one, the shepherd will leave the 99 and go get the one sheep. And you've all seen National Geographic Channel, you've all seen Discovery. Who does the lion and the coyote go after and the wolf on the plains of Africa? The one little impala, the one sheep that's all by itself. They will isolate it, and then they will attack it and kill it. And that's what happens, and that's what's happened to some of you. You find yourself in a corner, and you're just being bitten at one bite at a time by words, by thoughts, by self-talk, by emotions, and you're saying, how can I get out of this? And the response of most people who are trapped in isolation, the response of most people who are being attacked is to cower and hide and die a slow, painful death. Isolation and loneliness. You combine that with, see, nobody cares, nobody likes you, you're better off dead. I've heard this from literally hundreds of teenagers saying, that's exactly what happened. I said, I know. And as we begin to speak with them and pray with them, they're like, I was being lied to. I said, yes, you were. You see, once you understand the truth and once you see it for what it is, you're like, wow. The camouflage is pulled away. You're like, well, goodness, somebody's trying to hurt me. Yeah. But Jesus said what? The good shepherd goes and finds the 99, finds the one, brings it back to the 99, and he's excited. Why? Because one is important to God. One matters. One is important. One is what God is looking for. And I may be talking to one person. In any event that I do, I realize I may be speaking to one person. There may be 2,000 people in the event or in the school, and I know I'm talking to one person. You know what? It's worth every penny spent on an airplane. It's worth every time spent in a hotel. It's worth every second away from my family, because that one is important to him. Therefore, it becomes important to me. See, I would just as soon talk about this now instead of having to show up at a funeral and talk about it. And guess what? I've had to do that. I've had to do funerals for friends of mine who lost their children. And I made a commitment to God and myself. I said, I will never, ever stay silent about this again. I don't care who gets mad, who gets uncomfortable, who gets angry, because your life is important. You are valuable. The one in this room is important. Lack of self-worth, lack of community, breakdown of family, isolation, and loneliness. You combine all of these with a person who's already at risk, who may be struggling with some depression, maybe some chemical imbalance, somebody who may already be insecure or have, just maybe, a real introvert. Those dominoes start falling, and that last one hits you, and it becomes a tsunami of emotions. And that's where we see a lot of people make that incredibly crazy decision. The spiritual side of all of this is ridiculous. I need you to understand that why this topic is so passionate to me. My father committed suicide. So I'm vested. I have a chip in the game, if you want to call it such a carnal thing, but he did. So it's a personal topic for me to talk about. What does it say in the book of Ephesians, chapter 6? And then I want to go and I want to show you part of a production that we made. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 says, For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, wickedness, darkness in this world, in dark places, spiritual wickedness in high places. This is a fight that we're in. This is a battle for our souls. And if you're in this church, if you're in this youth group tonight, you know that there are two realms that we live in. When I talk about this to young people in South Africa, they all go, ooh. You know why? Because they understand the power of the Sangoma, the witch doctor in South Africa. I can talk about this to African young people, and you can hear them going, ooh, whispering behind the scenes, because they understand that there's two realms fighting for us. We are the prize. We are stuck dead center, and it's a huge tug of war. Let me tell you what, I am leaning toward the side that has my best interest. I am partnering with God to fight this battle for myself, because I know that Jesus has done everything for me. I need to put skin in the game. With me, so many young people say, well, I don't feel it. Looking, come on, man. Feelings come and go with every Red Bull that you have. 3 cups of coffee. I'm feeling good. Drops, man, I'm feeling terrible. Yeah, of course. It's not about what you feel, it's what you know to be true. Spiritual battle, eternal life is on the line. Your destiny's on the line. I believe that every one of you in here are called to do something great for God. Well, Chad, I don't want to be a preacher. That's not what I said. You're called to do something great for God. And I believe with that call, there are souls attached to the call that God has placed on your life. This is not just about you. This is about the people you're going to meet. This is about the people you're going to reach. This is about the people you're going to ultimately be an example of Christ to. Okay? The video. You want to see it? 10 years ago, how long ago was it, Paul? 10 years? 11 years? Thank you. The voice from the shadows, the man in black. I worked with Dr. Barron in Good Shepherd Ministries, and we had a television program and a youth curriculum called Youth Bites. Maybe you've heard of it. A lot of fun, traveled around the world, did some incredible things. It's still available out there somewhere. You can go to my website and see some of that. It's really good. But once we had the suicide happen here in San Bernardino, and one of the girls was involved in our Christian community, we made a decision to actually do something. I remember talking to Paul, who was producing at that time. I said, where can we go create a documentary about suicide? And Paul gets online, and he goes, I got it. And I walk over there, and he's got a skeleton on the screen in a forest. And he goes, this is it. This is the suicide forest in Japan called the Aokigahara. He said, let's go here, and let's do a documentary on teenage suicide. I didn't want to go do it because I was tripped out because my dad committed suicide. It was a problem for me. Took a deep breath, we went and did it, came back, created the documentary. Man, that thing exploded. Boom. Over 1 million views on YouTube. It's been pirated and hijacked and reused in so many videos all over the planet. And what we captured there was, what I believe to be incredibly supernatural. What you're about to see is a section of this video. It's not its full entirety, but it's the meat of it, and you'll understand why I showed this, why I'm showing it. It's about a 10-minute clip, but I want you to be patient with me. We've had it translated into 8 languages, and I promise you, every time I show this video overseas, in Africa, Brazil, India, something weird happens. And I'm not saying that to try to hypnotize you or set you up. I'm just telling you is that God uses this video in the most unusual ways. But let me say this. This video has a couple of graphic scenes in it. I'm just kind of letting you know in advance. I say that because I know that none of you play video games with any graphic content at all. I know that none of you curse and none of you say anything questionable. I understand that violence is just not a part of your physical or digital life, yeah? That's my disclaimer. And so what you're going to see really did happen. It is real. It's 10 minutes, and I want to come back up afterwards and just share another personal tidbit with you, and then we're going to pray. Can we do that? Is everybody good? Am I boring you? We're good? Come on, it's only like 8:05, 8:10. All right, we're ready. This is the Sea of Trees, Aokigahara, Japan. They're leaving. Now, one of the weird things about Japan is that there's manuals for everything that explain how to do this and such, but I think one of the most damning manuals found in Japan is called a Complete Manual of Suicide. And one of the reasons the Sea of Trees has come up facing Mount Fuji, because this book describes that it's actually the perfect place to die. Here it is. This is it. This is the Complete Manual of Suicide. I mean, this is the premier book here in Japan that explains how to kill yourself. And this is why the phenomenon of the Sea of Trees has grown to such great heights, because this book has planted seeds in the heart of young and old alike that the Sea of Trees is the place to go to hang yourself, to poison yourself. It's what's called a perfect place to die, if there is such a thing. And this book explains how to do it. It's only in Japanese, and you can only find it over here. And so it's amazing that something this small, something this innocuous, could in fact infect thousands of people, planting that seed in their mind that suicide is not only good, but there's an actual perfect way to die. Unbelievable. Behind me is Mount Fuji, Japan's largest active volcano. To my left and to my right is the Sea of Trees. This area has been popular with tourists for hundreds of years, but until recently, this pristine environment has been marred. The Sea of Trees has been known as the perfect place to die. People from Japan and from other parts of the world come here to tragically end their lives.
Well, from here, what it's telling you is, just the general idea of where the idea of Jukai and why people started killing themselves there. So the history of it and how you get inside and the different landmark points that you can look at in order for you to get to the place where you can kill yourself and not be found.
So really, these are three places where you could go in. They're trying to say that the main point of this is to go in, do it, and nobody will be able to find your body.
Exactly. Okay, so there's a bus stop called Momiji-dai entrance. It says if you keep going on the road for 1 kilometer, it's gonna come to a point where it's just trees. So if you go 100 meters, just 100 meters, even though you try to remember where you came from, you won't remember. And then eventually you will be eternally forgotten by others.
This is an alien environment. The lava that's been shoved up over thousands of years, the displacement of water have caused all these pockets and holes and caves that fall through. As you can see, every tree here has its roots dug into this massive infrastructure. The moss has a place to grow. You've got lichens, you've got homes for every kind of creature. It is beautiful. I'll give you that. It's one of the most beautiful environments I've ever seen. Like take for example this cave. Now there are these pockets, these recesses that go way beyond what you can see. Home for rabbits, spiders, lizards. There have been reports of people actually climbing into these cave areas and pulling rocks on themselves to bury themselves alive in structures like this. The concept of suicide can be difficult for anybody to talk about, but what makes it even more disturbing is that most of the suicides that do take place in this forest are based on this book. It goes so far that those who have been found have a copy of the book at their feet or on their person. In fact, if you go to the sections where it talks about how to end your life in this area, the recommended way to do it is by asphyxiation or by hanging. In fact, all throughout the forest, if you were to really take your time, you could find human remains that are here. If someone were to continue to fool around with books like the Suicide Manual, continue to involve themselves in elements of life that promote death, that promote depression, that feed that idea that you have to be alone and you have to take your life into your own hands, the end result is always going to be the same. Books like this are a fluke as far as I'm concerned. But the enemy uses books like this, the novelty of them, to prey upon those who have no relationship with God and to begin to sow those seeds of death into them. The ultimate culmination of that seed being brought back to life is death. This forest is a testament to the power of words in people's life. The answers that you're looking for are not found in a moment of knee-jerk decision and reaction. They're found in making a methodical choice to follow life, regardless of how far it seems to take you. Now, what you're seeing is not a setup. This is not a Hollywood prop. This is not something I paid for in the U.S. As we came into the forest and made our way to find a location, I began to smell something. It's familiar to me. I mean, I knew what it was, but never in my wildest dreams did I think that less than half a mile off the main road, I would come on something like this. The condition of the body shows one that's been here for a number of months. The elements have taken their toll. Most of the soft tissue is gone. The ligaments and the muscles are now holding the bones together. There's not even flies on this thing. It's like a mummy. And to find this in this place, it's a bit unnerving. We didn't come here to rejoice in someone's death. We didn't come here to see anything that... The whole issue is that this is a very real problem. Not just here in Japan, but around the world. And I don't even know what this guy's name is. I can't do anything for him now. I can't. And anything that I would do would totally be out of respect for burying the body. I mean, this is a scene that's unbelievable. Can you imagine coming into a place like this, knowing that this was your final resting spot? You've already made all your plans, you've already made all your preparations, you've said all of your goodbyes. I mean, what must your mind be thinking? I mean, your heart has got to be just racing, about to burst out of your chest. Your mind is flooded, your emotions are a mess, and you know that this is where your life ends. It's a horrible place to be. Especially a place like this, to where it's said that your body will never, ever be found. Even though you may be considering suicide, in the back of your mind, you do want to be found. Maybe you're doing this out of vengeance. Maybe you're doing this to get back at somebody. Maybe this is your last grand stage entrance in a life that has somehow been incredibly unfair to you. Maybe this is the way you're going to get back at everybody. You know, it's a very selfish way to think. Because when you find yourself here, all alone, it's just you, your mind, your soul, and your God. You're going to have to face Him. You're going to have to give an explanation as to why you chose to give up the greatest gift that you've ever been given, and that's life. And you can make all the excuses you want. You can say, well, nobody ever told me. You have been told. Well, I just didn't feel like it. You know what? It's not about the way you feel. It's about faith. It's about what you know to be true. When I was raised this religion, I was raised that religion. It doesn't matter about religion. Religion's never the answer. It's always a relationship with God. There has to be a place to where you humble yourself and you understand that what you're about to do cannot be rewound as on a tape player. You can't just push restart, it'll just come back. This is an eternal act. This is the final, ultimate decision that you have thought about and premeditated. Let me tell you what else you may not have considered, is you haven't planned this on your own. No way. You've had a greater force at play at this. Those thoughts that have been tormenting you, they're not your own. Those emotions that just seem to come on you like a wet blanket, those aren't your own either. You've got to open your eyes and realize that we are in a war. You're in a war. You're the prize. You are the prize for this war. One side is battling for you. The other is battling for you. But as you allow yourself to give in to that negative deception, to give in to that fear, to give in to those lies, to give in to the system that so wants to crush you like dust, what you're saying to the side, which gave everything for you, is, I'm a hopeless case. My life is too far gone. It's too messed up. You don't know what I've done. You don't know what's going through my head. Do you know? If you knew, if you could see what I thought, you'd never, ever accept me. You know what I want to do is I want that lie to be exposed in the name of Jesus. Every one of those spirits that's lying to you, I command it to let go of your mind. You need to open your ears right now. You need to open your heart and listen, because this isn't me speaking to you. This is God speaking to you. I'm just a man. But the message here is prying into that darkened thing that you call a heart. You know why? Because God's not giving up on you. You may have given up on yourself. Friends and family may have given up on you. But heaven is never going to give up on you. It'll keep badgering you and loving you and pulling you and encouraging you. And when you fall down, it'll keep pulling you back up. So in the name of Jesus, I speak life over you. I speak life, that darkness would flee, that the power of God, that's right, the power of God would fill your heart right now, and that the spirit of death would leave. And I speak life over you. If God can speak life into me, He can most assuredly speak life into you. None of us deserve what God has to offer. None of us deserve what God came to give, but He came to give it anyway. And that those who would believe even that much, the faith of a mustard seed can change your entire future. The Sea of Trees, a place where people come to die. But the way I see it, it's an incredible place to live. As the sun comes down on the Sea of Trees, I'm leaving. What about your life? The sun is going down. If you've even remotely considered suicide as an option, you need to turn and walk toward the light and get out of this place, because the longer you stay here, the longer you acknowledge that you're not worth anything and that no one can ever help you. Bring the music down, the audio, leave the scripture up. I need you to see that. It's still a very hard video for me to watch. Considering how many times I've actually played that video, and every time I watch it, I remember exactly what I was feeling that day in the forest, communicating with Paul directly to that camera. And when I watch it, I remember what I felt, and I feel it now. Is that God is desperately trying to speak to you, and He's going to do whatever He can to get you to hear His voice. I told you that suicide was personal to me, and I want to just make it a little more personal for you. Can I do that? Can I share it with you? Share with you my story. It won't take me long. You'll kind of get a glimpse of where I've been and why I'm doing what I do. Many years ago, there was a knock on my door. 2 police officers showed up. I opened the door. This is before internet. This is before cell phones. This is before a lot of things. This was in 1996. And he said, "Are you Chad Daniel?" I said, "Yeah." He said, here's I hate to tell you this, Mr. Daniel, but your father's dead. I said, "What?" He said, "All we have is this phone number. You need to call them. We're so sorry for your loss." And they turned and walked away. I said, "Okay." So I called the number and began to find out what happened. And I knew that I had to fly to where my father was living at the time. But let me give you a little backstory. When I became a Christian and really on fire for God, my father said, "Chad, you're a Jesus freak and a fanatic. Get the hell out of my house." I said, "All right, Dad, love you. I'm out." God took care of me from that point in my life, but my relationship with my dad was strained, as you can imagine. We didn't speak much, although we lived in the same city. He came to my wedding. I have a picture of me and my dad shaking hands at the wedding, but he didn't stay for long. And as he went through what he went through, the loss of my mother really put him into a bad place. The loss of his job put him into an even worse place. The tension between me and him and our relationship was even worse. So we hadn't spoken in probably 5 years, and this is the note I get from the police. I fly to my father's city. All I had was an address. I arrive at 3 o'clock in the morning. I had to rent a car. I drove to where the apartment complex was, and when I got there was caution tape around his apartment door and balcony, and I knew that I was at the right place. It said, do not enter crime scene. I said, yeah, right. So I went to the back, and through the street light, I was able to break the bathroom window, open the window, and I climbed in my father's apartment. The smell overwhelmed me. My father had laid in that apartment for 1 week, dead. He had no friends, no family. Nobody knew he was dead. The only way that one of the neighbors knew he was dead because there was some mail, or something was wrong because his mail never got picked up on the front of his porch. Walked into the house, saw where the body was laying. I was like, something's not right. You see, they didn't know how he died. They said, your father's been found dead. Please contact us. Well, I went through the house and found what the police didn't find. I knew my father. He was quirky. He was weird. And he always used to write things down. He had these journals. And I began to look through them, and I took my time. I wasn't in a hurry. I was already breaking the law. So I found one of the journals and began to leaf through it. And the electricity was off in the house at that time, obviously, so I backed up to the living room window, and there's a little street light there, and I go through it, and there it was, my father's suicide letter. The body was so decomposed, and they did the autopsy, there was no conclusive findings at all because he was gone. And I had kind of known this was going to be the case, but I was a little shocked as I began to go through the letter. And he addressed me and my two sisters and talked about how hard life was for him. And oddly enough, he brought up the 4 dominoes. He didn't know it, but my mother had died. He and I were estranged, breakdown of family. He lost his job, breakdown of community. He had struggled with depression and some other issues for years because of the crazy home life he had from his crazy mom. And then he got into isolation and loneliness and moved to live by himself in an apartment in an obscure city in Texas. He begins to read me the letter and tell me how hard life was, talking to my sisters first and then talking to us communally, and he addresses each one of them. And then he comes down to the bottom paragraph, and it says, Chad, you're a Jesus fanatic. You're an embarrassment to me. You're not my son. I take you out of my will. You get nothing. Don't even do my funeral. I said, wow. That's the last thing I heard from my dad. It hit me like a ton of bricks in the chest. I dropped the letter and stood there and just dumbfounded. I stood there silently and just sobbed. I didn't know what to do. I don't know if it was an hour or 2 hours. I fell on my knees, I got up, and I remember walking into my father's bedroom. And what I saw in that room shocked me. I walked into my father's bedroom, and the man who had just expressed his utter contempt for me and my God, in his bedroom, over his bed, was a picture of a 2-year-old boy. I looked at it and thought, oh my God, he did love me. I was the first thing he saw in the morning and the last thing he saw at night. I said, my father had been lied to. And I felt complicit because I didn't do what a son should have done to get close to his father, to try to build a bridge of reconciliation, to try to go and do what Jesus, because I was a Christian, I should have done what Jesus told me to do, and I didn't. Fear, insecurity, dad issues, you name it, I felt guilty. And I remember as I knelt down, fell down beside that bed and looked at that picture, I threw my hands in the air. I said, God, take this pain. If you can use this to reach one, I give it all to you. Take it. And he did. He did take it. In that video, you saw a book. This is it. It's a real book. This book tells a generation how to kill themselves. It tells you how to do it. It tells you where to go do it. It even has a list of top 10 most painful to least painful ways to kill yourself. It tells you you're not worth anything. It tells you you're a waste, you're a mistake. This book lies to you. It lies to a generation. But there's another book. There's another book that tells a generation how to live. It tells them what to do. It tells them who to believe. It lays out the course of eternity for you, that if you would believe what's written in these ancient pages, life eternal is open to you. As I've grown since that place in my life and really found a real place of maturity and healing and forgiveness, writing the book was a very cathartic experience for me. But doing events and talking to young people has done more to confirm to me that God heard my prayer that day in my father's bedroom when I said, God, if you can use anything, I give you this broken person. Use me. And he did. As I've walked through this with friends and family, I've realized there's only one thing that we have in this life that can really give us the strength to fight for ourselves, and it's God's word. If I had one thing to say to any one of you, it would be this: will you please begin to fight for yourself? Would you please begin to use the weapons that you've been given? Would you please begin to exercise that faith that you boast about on Wednesday night? Would you please begin to use it the rest of the week? You see, because if you're not willing to fight for yourself, you're somehow tying the hands of heaven. Well, if God wanted to do it, he would just do it. No. God moves by faith. God moves by faith. God moves by faith. When you step out in faith and you begin to respond in partnership with his word, saying, God,